turtles are this surprisingly long-lived group. They've been around for an incredibly long time. The first turtles date back to about 220 million years ago, which probably just sounds like a number. But if you think about the age of the dinosaurs, the first dinosaurs are about 230 million years ago. So turtles have been around for this incredibly long period of time. And the first turtles that we know of at this point is called Odontocheles. And Odontocheles looked a lot like a turtle, but it didn't yet have a complete shell, and it still had teeth. These early turtles also didn't yet have the ability to retract the neck fully into the head. And so oftentimes what you'll see on some of these earlier turtles is they have a very spiky neck, and also a fairly long neck. And presumably that's because those spikes were to protect the neck. Those were defensive structures. And it wasn't until later that you start to see this really unique ability to either completely retract the head and the neck into the body, or in many turtles also, as opposed to pulling the head straight back, they'll actually turn the head sideways and then pull it into their shell that way. Jump forward 10 million years, and you get a couple of different fossil species that now have a complete shell, and they've lost the teeth, so they now have what we call a beak, which is what all modern turtles have. So by 210 million years ago, you've basically got animals that look a whole heck of a lot like turtles do today. I mean, turtles sort of found this incredibly successful body plan. And there's certainly been lots of evolution in that 220 million year time period. Some of the earliest turtles clearly had sort of a shell and armor to some extent to basically act as sort of defensive structures to help protect them.
Ha! Are you guys okay?
We're bulletproof.
Sweet.
One of the earliest turtles actually had extensions of the shell that actually did a better job of protecting the limbs. But you also saw some really amazing structures, and some of these structures were really quite common throughout that 220 million year evolutionary history of turtles, including things like spikes on the head and spikes on the tail, including even clubbed tails. And so presumably these were defensive structures, but suddenly these turtles are starting to take on an appearance that's much more like Ankylosaurus, which is this well-known dinosaur with this massive clubbed tail.
That's harsh, man.
That overall morphology is something that has just been incredibly successful and has allowed turtles to do quite well. And of course, they've adapted to a variety of different habitats. You get tortoises on land, you get sea turtles, and you get freshwater turtles. And so they're able to exploit, a large number of environments, which is in part why we see them across much of the globe. One of the most amazing ones is right here in North America. So the single largest turtle that we know of is a turtle found in the fossil record of Wyoming and South Dakota. It's a species called Archelon. And that was a marine species, and it lived in this huge, shallow sea that covered much of North America at the time. So you're finding these fossils really, all over the place.
This is insane.
While the turtle species developed over time with proof in the form of fossils, these remains were uncovered on a global scale, from North America all the way to the Far East, home of the ninja.
The ninja were actually called the shinobi. Shinobi actually means to steal away or shadow warriors. These were types of people that would be hired by different areas, either different samurai or different villages and so on, to do espionage work, to do arsonists, to spy and all that. So these people had to be stealth. They had to be in the shadow. They had to be unaware and get into the situation, do their job, and get out. So that's what the ninja was all about.
Like shadows in the night, completely unseen.
What was that? It's a camera flash.
They were very inventive people. They had to invent unique styles of weaponry that couldn't be shown all over the place. They had to hide it all in their pockets in different areas. They had to sneak in and use whatever means they had to do to get in, find that information, start that fire, or even assassinate an individual. So the ninja were considered one of the most unique and one of the most inventive styles of martial arts.
As the 12th century to the 15th century went by, the folklore of the ninja became more and more prevalent.
All of a sudden, instead of just men, they were like ghosts that would appear out of the shadow. Later, during about the 15th century, things kind of changed. There weren't that many wars. The Tokugawa period came in. The samurai will kind of be removed. So the ninjutsu, the ninjas, which were called the shinobis, still wanted to survive. They still were needed, But what they had to do is change the whole outlook for how everybody looked at them. So instead of saying, oh, that's an assassin walking by, they had to change the name from shinobi to ninja. And from ninja, they made it more of a martial art. So now people were learning it more of a martial arts style. So now they were creating different sets of how you'd structure things, how you climbed walls, how you use ropes, how you do different things. And now is it more acceptable as a martial art form. And people looked at the ninja with awness rather than, ooh, they're just assassins.
While the legend of the ninja grew, the secret clan had to continue to adapt and evolve as decades passed, much like the turtle over centuries.
Longevity in turtles varies across species, and the sad reality is that we actually don't have a very good idea of how long turtles can actually live to. The oldest known turtle is a turtle that was actually collected by Captain James Cook and presented to the royal family of Tonga, and they kept it for 189 years before it passed away of natural causes. But when you think about an animal that might be living for upwards of 200 years, how many cases are where you can actually document that history from start to finish? So the reality is that it's quite likely that there are species of tortoise in particular that are capable of living more than 2 centuries, and we just haven't been able to document that yet. But in general, most of the turtles that we think about, things like common freshwater turtles and box turtles, are probably somewhere on the order of sort of 30 to 70 years. It's probably pretty common for most species, and it's really some of these tortoises that are getting up to sort of the 200-year mark. There's a lineage of turtles called the Meolonids. These were present until about 2,500 years ago. The last remaining Meolonid populations were on the island of Vanuatu, where they were believed to have been hunted to extinction by the early people that arrived to Vanuatu. And those turtles had these amazing horns that projected back off of their heads, as well as some very spiky horns on the tail. So some really, impressive and very different looking animals overall than what we sort of currently think about when we think of turtles.
While the turtles changed appearance over time due to environmental fluctuations, the ninja attire also went through some different phases.
The goal of the ninja is to be secretive. They had to get in and get out very quickly. They learned to climb walls. They wore dark outfits, and mostly they covered most of their face so people wouldn't see. They'd have certain ways of running so their arms wouldn't flail in the wind. Okay, so they had to keep everything very close and very tight. Same thing as their weapons. So everything had to be very secretive. The last thing you want is advertise you're a ninja. Many people said the ninja outfit came from the Bunraku theater. The Bunraku theater is the puppetry for Japan. These were puppets that were used to talk about different plays and different things, and there would be a handler behind each puppet. And each one would hold the arm and move the arm movements for the different plays. But they would be in an all-black outfit, and if you look very closely at the handlers of the puppet, they looked exactly like the ninja. So many people said that's where the ninja got their outfits from watching the Bunraku theater.
While the intention of the ninja uniform was to camouflage and conceal, the turtle shell's primary function was protection.
Turtle shells are this absolutely amazing structure that's this combination of dermal bone with existing bone, so the ribs and the backbone. And then on top of that layer of bone are these scutes. And the scutes are mostly made up of keratin, so the same stuff that is in our fingernails. And that provides this very protective, almost armor-like shell for these turtles. Turtles, of course, are vertebrates, and like all other vertebrates, turtles have a backbone. They have a vertebral column, and that vertebral column is fully integrated with the shell, with what we call the carapace, which is the top part of the shell. And so as you move along the neck of a turtle, you move down through the cervical vertebra, eventually you get to vertebrae that are actually fused with the shell. And so the vertebra and the ribs are forming part of the skeletal structure that is the shell. And so there's no way that a turtle can leave its shell, because the shell is completely integrated with the entire body of that organism.
While the turtle shell serves a defensive purpose in most cases, the ninja were also developing defensive skills, changing and adapting their physical appearance to remain in secret.
One of the most unique aspects of the ninja is being able to camouflage himself. Now, most people see the Hollywood ninja in the different black outfits, and that is quite true in some cases. But they had to dress to get into different situations. For example, sometimes they dress as a geisha to get into the gate and to get into the fort, or a woodworker or a priest. Now, for the ninja, unlike the samurai, the weapons they use were part of their tools. So if they had to climb a wall, they would use the sword as their ladder. They would hide their weapons in different places so they can throw them out very quickly. They use poison, they use different types of things, whatever they needed to do, make it small and compact or whatever they wore, and get into the situation. Sometimes they'd hide in the water, you know, with a little reed on top to hide underneath, or sometimes they'd hide in the ground. So whatever they needed to do their job and get paid, that's what they would do.
While the ninja developed many impressive skills, the impervious turtle also has many astounding traits.
Because you see turtles in a wide variety of habitats, their unique adaptations differ by some of those habitats. So leatherback sea turtles, for example, are capable of making these massive dives to impressive depths, like 4,000 feet deep in the water, looking for things like squid and other food items. And that's pretty amazing to think about, to be able to sustain a dive when you're encountering atmospheric pressures that are as great as you would experience at 4,000 feet of depth. If you look at something like the desert tortoise, and many other species of tortoises, they can go months or years without taking a drink of water. And they're getting all of the liquid that they need, all of the water that they need from the food, from the plants that they're eating. So I think that's a pretty amazing adaptation. You see a huge variety of really interesting adaptations in various turtle species.
As survival pushed evolution along, turtles excelled in developing key skills to keep the species prominent. The ninja weaponry also evolved, becoming more stealth and dangerous over time.
Let's talk about a little bit about the ninja turtles and the different weapons that they have. One of the turtles has a sword, katanas. He has actually two swords. It's a little bit different than the actual Japanese katana sword. The katana is more of a long sword, more of a curve. The ninja sword is more of a straight sword, usually bladed on both ends, sharp on both ends. And in this case, the turtle uses two of them in the back behind him. One of the more common weapons is the bow staff used in one of the ninja turtles. Bow staff is considered the father of all martial arts weapons. It is a very effective weapon used. It's a long staff, usually about to the ear, about this high, and it's used quite a bit for hitting. It's a very powerful weapon, and it's very hard to defend against if someone knows it very well. The samurai were the only ones allowed to carry weapons, the swords, so the farmers had to create their own weapons, and one of the weapons they used was called a sai. Now, the sai was originally a planting tool for planting seeds, but later became a weapon that you could use for poking or stopping a blade as well.
Dude.
Nunchucks is one of our most unique style of martial art weapon. Many people think it's just Japanese weapon, but it's also from many of the different Asian countries. Japan, China, the Philippines, Korea all had the same type of weapon. The nunchaka was actually a long pole with a small stick on the end, and was used for making wheat and rice. So they were pounding it. So when you see the old movies or the old pictures of someone pounding rice and wheat, it would be a nunchaka. And all they did was just taper it down and make it small weapons, and it became very popular.
While ninja artifacts and recreated weaponry can certainly be found in and amongst Manhattan, the turtle has also found a home in the Big Apple.
I think one of the most interesting and sort of realistic aspects of the Teenage Mutant Ninja story is that in the earliest incarnation, it was that these turtles were dropped into the sewer, were living in the sewer. And what's interesting about that is that in New York, there really aren't that many native turtles cruising around New York. But you go to New York City, and there are some turtles. There's actually a number of turtles hanging out in Central Park, the most common of which is the red-eared slider. This is the most common species in the pet trade. It's the most common species in the New York area. It's not native to New York. Red-eared sliders should not be in New York. Those were all released pets. So the idea that somebody, that some turtles got into the sewers of New York is actually not all that far-fetched, in the sense that lots of turtles have been dumped in urban ponds and urban waterways in New York as it already stands.
Please keep your arms and legs inside the shell at all times.
One of the biggest areas of turtle research that's really grown in the last, I'd say 25 years, is the conservation science. Trying to figure out what are the threats to these various species, and what we can do to try to keep some of these species on the planet. It's certainly my hope that people can see the movie, they can get excited about turtles, but then they can sort of take those extra few steps and really learn a lot more about turtles and realize that there's this big conservation side that we should all be really passionate about as well.